2019 has been a year unlike many, but it is hard to believe that we are already at the halfway point. Nobody could have predicted the current situation we are in, but something we did know that was going to happen was the launch of the new consoles in fall. Despite the halt in production a lot of industries have seen as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, both Microsoft and Sony appear to be on track to release their PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X units as intended. And while Microsoft has been fairly active in trying to garner interest for their new hardware, Sony has been noticeably quiet, until recently that is. Sony has finally announced an official reveal event for the PlayStation 5, and it seems like gamers are going to get a good glimpse as to what we can expect for the system this fall. Gaming has gone through a lot since the launch of the PlayStation 4. Nintendo hit success with the Switch by introducing their new hybrid hardware nobody knew they wanted until they had it, and Microsoft has spent the second half of the Xbox One's life cycle repairing the damage Don Matrix legacy left behind. But Sony has been able to ride the wave of success the PS4 has brought since launch without too much need to divert the path in which they were heading, meaning that this is the first time in a long time we will get a meaty official Sony presentation specifically about the future of the PlayStation brand, which leaves a lot of room to speculate for what the future of PlayStation could possibly look like. When compared to the Xbox Series X, we know next to nothing about the PlayStation 5. We heard about the new Xbox for the first time at Microsoft's E3 press conference last year, we actually saw the console during the Game Awards, and we had a gameplay showcase for the console earlier in the month, with a strong asterisk next to the word gameplay. We were also presented with a fairly comprehensive plan for backwards compatibility for the Xbox Series X, where Microsoft confirmed that game libraries on the One are going to be following us into the next generation, even going as far as to enhance the gameplay experience for previous gen games as a native hardware feature. What is more interesting, however, is that Microsoft supposedly does not intend to have any Series X exclusive games for the start of the console's lifespan, meaning that Xbox One users should be able to play new titles on their current hardware for the next few years to come. It appears as though we can start to view the Xbox as a phone-like piece of hardware in regards to the way that it will iterate. What I mean by this is that Xbox has been able to tear down the typical barriers that present themselves with new gaming hardware. Traditionally, a system would launch, and that would be the box we would play on for the better half of a decade. But once the next iteration came up, everyone joined the clean slate club and started from scratch again. Microsoft has effectively removed themselves from this cycle with the Series X, and it will be interesting to see how this pans out. At first it seems outlandish, but considering that new iterations of the iPhone launch every year at a cost higher than typical console MSRPs, it isn't that hard to believe, especially if game libraries are able to remain as fluid between hardware from here on out as Microsoft is making it seem. So where does this put the PlayStation? For the first time in a long time, I think we're going to see two very different machines launch this fall in regards to the type of experiences users get. While the Series X is appearing to be a technical powerhouse for the living room, the overall Xbox experience isn't going to change too much for the end user. It is just going to be a better place to play games. PlayStation, however, is appearing to be in line with what we would understand as a traditional console launch. Whereas the Series X pumped more flops into the box, Sony has hinted at some interesting work they are doing revolving around audio design and SSD usage. This information comes from Mark Cerny himself, the system architect behind the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 5, as well as the mastermind behind Crash and Knack. I'll be honest, I wasn't smart enough to follow his developer-aimed CES conference, where he went into the nitty-gritty as to what the PlayStation 5 tech is going to do for gaming, but there was some information my little baby boy brain was able to get. First and foremost, loading is apparently a thing of the past for this console. This is going to make for snappier game experiences where users are going to be playing more than waiting, which is a welcome addition because as games continue to get huge over the years, the amount of time it takes to get into the game has also gotten noticeably longer. While faster loading is great, however, what has me most intrigued is the audio enhancements that have been made to the PlayStation 5. Mr. Cerny spent a considerable amount of time on this feature during his presentation, but it is so unlike something we've ever seen handled in games before that I really had no way to imagine what he was talking about. That was until the Unreal 5 tech demo we got in mid-May. The Unreal 5 tech demo was run natively on a PlayStation 5 and gave us a glimpse as to the power the next-gen hardware was going to produce, but this is the clip that got me the most excited.
We've made some great additions to our audio system as well. Convolution reverb allows us to measure reverberation characteristics of real spaces, like actual caves that we sampled, and reproduce them in virtual spaces. Sound field rendering allows us to record and playback spatialized audio. All of this adds up to a more immersive experience.
I understand that they are discussing the engine here, but Epic has made sure to specify that this tech demo was on the PlayStation 5, and I suspect that the audio inclusion was one of the reasons as to why. I bet the PS5's audio capabilities, coupled with the tools included in Unreal Engine 5, can make for some interesting combinations. I can only imagine how game developers are going to be able to use sound as a new way to develop games, and it is going to take time for them to get used to having this enhanced tool at their disposal. In addition to this, the PlayStation 5 controller is set to have what is referred to as adaptive triggers, which will allow developers to program the resistance that the triggers have in order to simulate actions more accurately. The example provided by Sony being a situation involving a bow and an arrow. Probably not a coincidence. All of these new hardware features really seem like they're going to make for more immersive experiences, and according to Jason Schreier, developers are also really high on the capabilities of the platform. As gaming continues to develop, I think we're going to get lost in some incredible worlds throughout this next generation. The Series X does look like an impressive box, but what Sony doesn't have in the flops, they have in unique design. Something I think that is a direct result of having a traditional console release cycle, as when Sony is viewing this hardware as the PlayStation hardware until the eventual PlayStation 6 release, they are going to take the time to do something unique to have their console stand out from the crowd, as opposed to just an iteration in additional power. But what is hardware without the games? Arguably the strongest aspect of PlayStation's identity. Over the past 25 years, Sony has been able to acquire a set of IPs and studios that rival the likes of Nintendo, and with the PlayStation 4 specifically, some of the generation's best experiences were found only on the PlayStation platform. God of War had such fun gameplay with a narrative that kept me enthralled from start to finish, Uncharted 4 was the best Universal theme park ride I've been to, well, until Nintendo World comes out, and Horizon Zero Dawn was almost as good as Breath of the Wild. There is no doubt in my mind that there are some strong first-party titles in development right now. God of War 2, Horizon 2, and Spider-Man 2 are a few sequels we can expect during the first few years of the PlayStation 5, and there are probably also some new IP on the way to help pad out the barrage of sequels. Sony has always done a good job of spacing out their games and giving each a moment to shine, and with the success their first-party titles see, I doubt this strategy is going to change. I think it is obvious that we are going to get a big hitter for the launch of the PS5, and personally my money is on Horizon 2. The timing is right, and it seems like the right choice to show off the new shiny features of the hardware. It would also line up well with the decision made to put the first Horizon on Steam, something that is probably going to help get the conversation going on the original again, while also potentially bringing more people on board the PlayStation platform who would have otherwise not bothered. But this is all about new games on the PlayStation, and something people are also concerned about is being able to have their old games present on current hardware. As I mentioned earlier, Microsoft has an extremely comprehensive plan for backwards compatibility, taking them back to the original Xbox. There was a lot of effort put in on their part, and it took a lot of time and money to get to where it is today. Sony, on the other hand, is seemingly behind on this front, and all we can do to hope is that they have something going on behind the curtains, because as it seems right now, the future of backwards compatibility on the PS5 can appear to be a bit bleak. It was announced during the Cerny conference that PS5 will at least be backwards compatible with PS4, and although we really don't know what that looks like, we know that supposedly hundreds of games will be ready to go day one. I'm not concerned about the PS4 backwards compatibility. As EA CFO spilled the beans, PS5 is going to have a Series X-like smart delivery feature, which is going to allow for games to be upgraded to the next generation for free. Although this does not speak specifically to backwards compatibility, PS5's hardware is probably more in line with the PS4 than what the PS4 was to the PS3, making for the porting of previous experiences less of a headache and much easier to accomplish. What I am concerned about, however, is having access to anything before the PS4 on the PS5 and what that looks like. Which brings us over to PlayStation Now, Sony's streaming service which has been around since 2014 and still feels like a beta version of Xbox Game Pass. PlayStation Now was Sony's answer to backwards compatibility, but in the form of streaming. This made sense for PS3 titles, as it is probably easier to stream those games rather than port them to new hardware due to its cell processor. Sony has since made improvements allowing for PS2 and PS4 games to be downloaded directly to systems as opposed to just being streamed, but the service still feels neglected. In recent months, some bigger games have made their way over to PS Now, but the wind gets taken out of the sails of an announcement like that when the date that the games are leaving the service is also included in the announcement. Take a look at the announcement of GTA 5 making it to PS Now versus the announcement of Red Dead Redemption 2 making it to Game Pass. Game Pass feels like it is getting a big addition here to stay, whereas PS Now makes it feel like an extended game trial. Sure, a few months is enough to get through these games and see the content, but services like these thrive when it feels like consumers have an everlasting collection of quality content to pull from rather than just a limited limited amount of time to experience something. I'm really hoping we see a stronger commitment to PS Now from Sony in the future. The service has so much potential and could address the issue of backwards compatibility while showing a viable competitor to Game Pass all with one service. I would love to see PlayStation Now included in the conversation of PlayStation 5 and become a more important service to the PlayStation ecosystem in some sort of capacity. I don't expect Sony to offer their first-party titles day one on the platform, but a mic drop announcement like that is going to be needed if Sony expects PlayStation Now to become anything more than what it already is. I won't lie and say that Sony's silence until now hasn't had me a bit concerned, but we still have plenty of time until the launch of the PlayStation 5 to get the hype train really started. Sony has some great momentum right now thanks to the success of the PlayStation 4, and if they play their cards right, they can have another cash cow on their hands. I really hope this reveal event gets us a lot of the information we have been clamoring for, and while I don't expect the sun, I think now is the time for Sony to lay it all out on the table and show us what they got. Thanks for watching.